Welcome back to the channel, guys, and I hope you guys are doing pretty good. So we are in the 90 days SDET interview preparation series. And the thing over here, guys, in today's class, we will be focusing on questions related to the company Capgemini. Now, a couple of days back, there was this one student of the SDET masterclass who had given the interview for Capgemini. So these questions are basically legit questions. These were the questions which was asked to him. So we want to make sure that we are preparing for all these questions. Now, in today's class, the focus is going to be on a bit of a hybrid approach. Okay, we will be seeing a set of questions, not just one or two questions. So we will be focusing on questions from the topic of Java, rest assured, that is your API testing. Along with that, we will be solving one coding question. Now, this entire session might be a little bit lengthy. So please make sure, guys, that you have your tea, coffee ready and make sure that you make your notes. So have your notebook and pen ready also. Okay. Throughout this entire sessions, I will be asking you questions. So please make sure that you are answering those questions also, because the more you try to answer the questions by yourself, the more you get engaged in this entire series, you will be able to present yourself more confidently in your main interviews. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready. Without wasting time, let's get started. Now over here, guys, we have been given a set of questions and we'll only focus on the first question for now. And the first question is the difference between string buffer and string builder. The difference between string buffer and string builder. Now, before we go to the main notes, I want you guys to answer it by yourself. Okay, what do you know about string buffer and string builder, how they're different from each other? Okay, take a moment, think about it. So I hope you guys were able to answer it off, but here's the thing, guys. When we are talking about string buffer and string builder, they both offer dash. What they offer? They offer mutability. Okay? They offer mutability. Mutability means what? Mutability means you will be able to perform modification. Okay? So if you want to modify your string, if you want to modify the string, you can either go for string buffer or string builder. Now, when we are talking about modification of string, should we use the normal string class? We have the string class now. Now, is string, normal string, mutable? The answer is no. This is not mutable. Meaning, any modification that you're going to do on a string, it is going to result in creation of a new string. There is a dedicated lecture that I have created for this particular channel where we have discussed how exactly string works in memory. And that also, guys, is a very important interview question. Okay, a lot of time people ask is like how exactly string is getting stored in the memory. Okay, so please make sure that you watch that particular lecture. Over here, guys, remember that strings are basically not mutable, they are immutable, meaning any modification that you are going to do on a string, okay, results in creation of a new string. But if I want to modify a string, then it is always better to use string buffer or string builder. Now, string buffer and string builder, one is thread safe, one is not thread safe. Which is thread safe, which is not thread safe? Think for a moment. Yes. So when we are talking about your string buffer, string buffer is synchronized. Because it is synchronized, it is thread safe. And because it is thread safe, it is slow. Please make a note of this particular point. So whenever we are talking about string buffer is synchronized, and because it is synchronized, it is thread safe, and because it is thread safe, because it is synchronized, okay, it is going to be slow. And the thing is, you can use string buffer in a multi-threaded environment. So if you want to access a particular string, there will be a lot of modification that is going to happen on a string in a multi-threaded environment and all. Then guys, you are supposed to use string buffer. But if you are going to have a single threaded application, okay, then you should be using string builder for modification, because it is not synchronized, and that's the reason it is not thread safe. Because it is not thread safe, you can definitely not use it in your multi-threaded environment, and it is fast. Okay, it is fast. So these are the core points that you should always remember about string buffer, string builder, and string. Now let's go to the main answer over here. I have created a table for you guys. So over here, when we are talking about your string buffer and string builder, they both are mutable alternative to string. String is immutable. If I want to do any kind of modification, I'm supposed to use string buffer or string builder. There are key differences, okay, is basis on the thread safety. So when I'm talking about string buffer is going to be synchronized, right? I said over here string buffer is synchronized, and because it is synchronized, it is going to be thread safe. String builder is not thread safe. It's not thread safe. So the thing is, whenever you are going to have synchronized keyword, remember that it is going to be slow. It is going to be slow. Okay. There is one place where we use synchronized keyword. In which design pattern you have used synchronized keyword? Yeah, take a moment, think about it. It's singleton design pattern. Okay. In singleton design pattern. There was this one lecture also in this entire series that I have discussed about the singleton design pattern. Please make sure that you watch that lecture also. It's going to be very useful. But anyways, remember that when you're going to have anywhere synchronized keyword, or you're going to use the synchronized functionality, the performance is going to be slow because there is going to be lock. Okay, the code block is going to get locked, and only one thread can actually access that particular block of code. String builder, because it is not synchronized, because it is not thread safe, it's generally faster. And when to use? When you're going to have a multi-threaded environment, you're going to use your string buffer. But if you're going to have single-threaded environment, you will always use string builder. So you will see that whenever I'm having any string interview questions or any kind of a string program which is there, I generally use your string builder. Never use, your normal string to store the final result. Okay. Introduced your string buffer was introduced in Java 1 itself, whereas your string builder was introduced later, which was in Java 5. Okay. So please make sure that you remember this much part for your interview. Now, in the test code, okay, if it is going to be a single threaded, always prefer string builder. Again, in interview, they will ask which is better. So always say that it's better to use string builder in your automation framework, because you're not going to do a lot of modifications. You always extract the data and all. So, but in case there is going to be any kind of, a modification that is happening, so your test generally runs in isolations. So it's better to use string builder. And the reason for using string builders will be these points. Okay. So please make sure that you remember these points properly. I hope this particular part is clear to everyone. Perfect. Take a moment, pause this particular video and read through this entire table one more time. Okay? I hope you have gone through the first question, guys. Now let's move on to a very important interview question, which is how do you handle flaky test? How do you handle flaky test? Now, I hope everyone knows what exactly flaky test means. Flaky test means sometimes the test is going to pass, okay? And then sometimes the same test fails, and then when you're going to rerun it again, the test pass. So the whole point over here is when you are going to rerun the test in your different environments, probably in your CI pipeline and all those stuff. So over there can be scenarios where your CI pipeline fails because of the flakiness of that test. Sometimes the test is passing, sometimes the test is failing and all. And in Selenium, this is a very common issue, okay, because the element is visible but it's technically coming a little bit late. There is going to be a synchronization issue, okay. So there can be a lot of reason for flakiness, but flakiness is something which is a problem and that flakiness needs to be solved. So again, in interview they can ask questions related to flakiness of the test. How do you handle flaky test? They can also ask, tell me a scenario where you have seen flakiness, okay, in your application. So you need to remember some of the scenarios of your application where you have observed flakiness. Okay, so please remember the scenarios, and whenever you are answering any question, you should always come up with a story, okay, where you have seen it in your project. Over here, this probably might be more like a theoretical stuff, but the thing is, it's only you can know where exactly the scenario has appeared in your projects. So try to observe your project where you have seen flakiness, okay, and how you are going to overcome it. The how part, you can actually take it from this notes. Now, over here, guys, as I've said, when we are talking about flakiness basically means sometimes the test passes, sometimes the test fails. And because it's flaky, because the tests are not concrete now, you cannot trust that particular test. So if your CI pipeline passes sometimes and then it fails sometimes, then it's not something that you can really rely on, right? So at the end of the day, what your manager is going to tell you that, hey, please run the entire flow manually and then you give the sign off. Then if I had to run the entire test manually itself, then why did I bring automation into the first place? Because at the end, the final verdict is getting decided by the manual execution, right? So this is something that is a very, like an important issue that needs to be solved in your entire automation process. So anyways, if you are going to have any flaky test, the first thing you need to do is you need to identify the root cause. And generally, it's always going to be on the timing issues. When I'm talking about timing issues, I'm talking about the synchronization issue of your of your Selenium WebDriver code. There can be test data dependency that can be there. Environment instability can also be one of the reason. Or sometimes your test order dependency. Okay. Now, remember one thing. Whenever you are creating any test, those tests needs to be executed in isolation. Okay. There are few important characteristics which are there for a good test that you need to remember. So if I am supposed to talk about what defines a good test, okay, or good test script, then what we're going to see? The first one that comes into picture is your test has to be small. Okay, the length of your test method, okay, the @ test method that we have, okay, you have to make sure that that test method is as small as possible, okay. The second thing over here is your test should be independent. So all the test method that we are going to have, the test method should be independent. Okay, your test should not depend on other tests. Okay, meaning you should be able to run them in complete isolation. If I am able to achieve this, if I am able to make my test independent, then you will be able to run them in parallel mode also. Okay, the third one that comes into picture is that whenever you're going to create any test, your test, okay, should not have any coding logic, meaning you cannot use if statement, the conditional statement. You cannot have loops. You cannot have try catch. Okay, so these are some important rules that you should always remember about what exactly defines a good test script. And the thing over here is, again, this part, this part which I have written over here, they can ask in interview like, how do you maintain, how do you ensure that your tests are maintainable? Okay, maintainable. So these are some of the rules that you should always remember, that you're going to make your test as small as possible, because if it is a small test, it's easy to maintain. Then there should be independence. Each of the tests should be independent from each other. Okay, if they are going to be dependent on each other, you're not going to be able to achieve parallel execution. And you have to make sure that all your test methods do not have any coding logic. There should not be any for loop, conditional statements, your try catch and all those stuff. Because the moment you add any of these, what is going to happen? You are introducing logic. And your test methods should have simple statements. So they are just going to have test steps, and these steps technically don't have any logic. These are just statements that needs to get executed. Okay. Now, over here, the first part is to identify the root cause. There can be timing issues, there can be data dependency, environment instability, the configurations, the versions of the softwares which are installed on the server might not be proper. There might be some configuration mismatch, something like that. So you need to make sure that those things are fixed. Okay. The next one that comes into picture is add proper weight. If you're using thread.sleep, and I'm pretty sure you guys are not using, but in case if you're using thread.sleep, please make sure that you change it to explicit weight. Okay, that is, you're going to use WebDriver weight with expected condition. Then the next point over here is isolate test data. Each test creates and tear downs its own data. There should be no shared state. Okay, there should be no shared state. Then you can also have retry logic. When we're talking about retry logic, you can definitely use the retry analyzer, okay, and have a maximum of 2 or 3 retries, whatever you prefer over there. Quarantine, tag the flaky test, move them out of the main pipeline until fixed. This is important. So if your tests are flaky, please make sure that unless the issue is solved, you don't add them into your CI pipeline, give it a different tag or put them into a different group. So in this way, they will not be part of your main CI pipeline until the main issue is getting resolved. Then run in parallel. Sometimes the flakiness is always going to be because of the serial ordering, like you are executing the test one after the other. So in order to solve this particular stuff, you ensure that the tests are getting executed in isolation, that is in your parallel mode. And the next point over here, guys, is make sure that you're doing aggressive logging. So screenshot, network logs, console errors on failure. Just make sure that these things are there for your diagnosing of your flaky test. So this is something which is again important. Please remember these 7 points. Along with that, please remember what defines a good test script. Okay. So quickly, if you want, you can take a screenshot of it or probably just write it down in your notebook. It's going to be very helpful for you guys. Okay. Now let's move on to the next question over here, which is difference between query params versus path params. Again, this particular question has been asked so many times, okay, mostly in your service-based company. So let's try to understand what is the difference between query param versus path param. Now, guys, when you're talking about path params, right? Path params is basically used to identify a specific resource. This is important. Okay. You want to make a note of this particular point because a lot of time what I've seen now that people really miss on the topic of path params and query params. So whenever you're talking about path param is always going to give you that specific resource. So over here, if you look carefully, there is an example that there is going to be a user resource and I'm giving the ID. You're going to have a lot of user data and you're just going to give the ID. So it's going to give me the data of the user who has an ID 42. When you're talking about path param is always going to be inside the URL path. So over here in rest assured, whenever you need to give path param, in your given, you're just going to attach the path param method. Given the path param is ID whose value is 42, get user, and this is going to be the placeholder ID. Okay. So this ID which you see, this is going to be replaced by the value 42. Okay. So this 42 technically can come from a variable, it can come from a different API request, whatever. But the thing is, over here, we will not do hard coding. Okay, we will not do hard coding. For any kind of a path param, okay, you will always use the path param method. That's the simplest thing. So in interview, they can ask you the question, how do you set up path param? Okay, in your rest assured. So you're going to use the path param method. I hope this part makes sense to everyone. Now, the next thing which is there is query param. Okay, query param basically used for filter sorting as well as for pagination. So understand the difference over here. When you're going to talk about path param is basically used to get specific resource. Okay. Whereas your query, as the name suggests, query is going to be used for a filtration. Okay, you want to filter, you want to sort, or you want to have some kind of a pagination. That time you will be using your query params. Query params is going to come after a question mark, okay, in the URL. So users technically is the endpoint, and this what you see, role equal to admin, okay, and page is 2. So how do we read it? The endpoint over here is users and users where the role is admin. So the question mark becomes where the role is admin and the page is going to be 2. So given the query params, okay, role as admin, query params as page 2, get users. So this becomes the endpoint. And your rest assured technically adds the rest of the stuff. So over here, you're going to have users. After users, automatically there will be a question mark which will be added. And the order is going to be maintained. Role is going to be equal to admin. And page is going to be equal to 2. So take a moment. Read this whole stuff one more time, that when you're talking about path param is used to identify a specific resource and query param is used for filtration, sorting and pagination. Okay, remember this particular snippet because in interview they will again ask, okay, write a snippet of how do you pass query or your path param into your rest assured. So just make sure that you remember that after given, you're just going to attach the path param or the query param. Okay, write this particular snippet at your end quickly. I hope this particular part is clear to everyone. Can we move on to the next one? All right, Let's move on to the next question over here. Interesting. So this was the interview question which was asked to the candidate, that you're supposed to find duplicate elements or duplicate element in an array. Find the duplicate element in an array. So how do you do that? Yes, take a moment, think about it. How you are going to find the duplicate element? Whenever you're talking about duplicate, okay, what is the opposite of duplicate? Unique. Okay, so whether you have duplicate or you're going to have unique, a very special data structure, a very special collection is going to come into picture. That is going to be your set. Why set? Because set is the only data structure, set is the only data structure which does not store duplicate values. Okay, set is the only data structure which is not going to store duplicate values inside. It is always going to have unique value. So the add method of your set technically returns a boolean, okay, which is going to be true or false. So if it was able to add the element into the set, you're going to get true. If it was not able to add the value inside the set, it means false. And it is only going to give me false when the element is already present in the set. Meaning the second time whenever you're doing an addition or like you're adding the value, you're technically adding a duplicate value. And because this value is duplicate, you will end up getting false. So what you will be doing, you will be iterating the entire array. You're going to get all the elements one by one. You'll try to store it inside a set. You're going to check whether the element got added or not. If the add method returns false, technically it is a duplicate element. So you're supposed to print it on your console. That's it. So I want you guys to first write this particular program at your end. Once you have written the code, okay, you can just technically check my screen while I'll be writing the program, the code for the same. Quickly start writing this code at your end. So guys, we are in the Eclipse. This is the 90 days SDET interview prep. I'm going to open the SRC main Java. And over here, we will be quickly creating a new package. Let's call this particular package as com.day24. And inside this, we will be quickly creating a class. Let's call this particular class as what? Duplicate elements. Okay. Click on finish. Let's introduce the main method. You know, guys, a lot of time people ask me that, Jatin, you know, AI is there and now AI can write the code. And still, you know, companies are asking coding questions and all those stuff. See, these things are going to take a little bit time and all those stuff. But the most important thing is you should be ready for any kind of question which is going to be asked in interview. Okay. If they ask you coding question, you should be ready for that. If they're going to ask you related to your framework, you should be ready for that. If they're going to ask you related to your system design or probably on your framework stuff, you should be well prepared for it. Okay. Again, I'm repeating, a lot of time when you see the content over there, generally people are still preparing for the interviews as if it is 2015, 16 and all. It's not, it's changed. It's 2026 going on right now. So please make sure, guys, that you are building projects, you are preparing for a lot of things. Okay. Don't waste your time. Okay. The most important thing that you have right now is only the time. That is your entire leverage. If you're able to focus, if you're able to complete these things and study these topics on regular basis, I can give you in writing that your main interviews are going to be a little bit easier. Okay. So at the end of the day, you never really know when exactly the opportunity is going to pop up on your door. So you have to be ready. Are you getting the point? So over here, guys, coming back to this particular question, we have this class duplicate elements. We have the main method. Inside this particular class, what we will be doing is we will be creating an array. So I'm just going to have an array called input. Okay. And over here, we will quickly have some values 10, 20, 30, 40, 40. Okay. And let's say 10. So you know that 40 and 10 are basically the duplicate elements, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create a set of integer. Okay. And you technically have anything. It doesn't really matter whether you want hash set or linked hash set, whatever you want, you use that. I'm just going to use a hash set for to give the reference variable. I'm just going to call this as input set. And this is going to be of integer type. Okay. Then what we will be doing is we will be traversing this particular array one by one. We'll technically get all these elements one by one. So I'm going to have this for loop. Okay. Technically, I'm going to use the for each over here. From the input array, one by one, you give me the number. Okay. And what we will be doing is we will try to add it into the input set. So input set dot add. Now you will notice that input set dot add method returns me boolean. Okay. So over here, what I'll do is I'll just pass the number to this chap. Okay. And for your convenience, I'll print this thing off. Okay. So this thing will print it off over here. Okay. And we give a little bit of white space. Then I can literally just print the number just to show you something. Let's remove all the other stuff. Control Shift F, save it. Okay, let's click on the play button. And you will notice 10 will be added, 20 will be added, 30, 40. Okay. Till now, all the elements were unique. But over here, we got false for 40 and we got false for 10, meaning 40 is getting repeated. It's the second time it is popping up. 10 is also appearing for the second time. So these two are basically the duplicate elements. Of course, we don't want to print this particular stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a if. I'm going to say input set. Okay. Not add number. Now, for all the duplicates, okay, add method is going to return me false for all the duplicate elements. What I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put a not over here. Meaning, now, because we have a not, for all the duplicates, I'm going to get true. Okay, because we have a not condition that has been added. Right? So, if your add method returns me false, opposite of false is true, then this particular condition, okay, is going to become true and we'll do something over here. So I'm just going to say sys out the number. Okay. And that's it. Finish. And this ends over here. This ends over here. And we just need one more curly bracket. We can remove this. We not really need this part. Let's click on the play button. Let's see the output. And if I bring this guy, you got 40 and 10 popping up. Okay. So 40 and 10 are technically the duplicate elements. The order can be anything. Let's say if I just put 40 here. Okay. And what I can do is I can just remove this from here. Okay. Let's click on the play button. It still works. Okay. This is something which is there. I hope this particular part makes sense to everyone. It's a very simple program, guys. It was not that difficult, to be honest, but this is what it is. I hope you guys have written the code. There's a lot of variations that you can get for duplicate elements and all. Okay, so please make sure that you solve this particular stuff pretty well. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. Now guys, let's move on to the next question, which is the syntax for parallel execution. Now this particular question also, guys, has been asked so many times. Okay, literally, if I have to tell you that if there are going to be 10 interviews, out of those 10 interviews, you're going to find 6 or 7, they are going to ask about parallel execution. How do you set up parallel execution in your automation framework? How do you do parallel execution in your framework? Okay. And more or less, the answer is going to be exactly same over here. The first thing over here is you will be talking about, you should be configuring the parallel execution in your test.ng XML file. That's the step number 1. You should be configuring your test.ng XML file. And in your test.ng XML file, guys, you will be introducing a parallel attribute. Okay, what you see over here is basically the parallel attribute. This needs to be introduced, and the value of parallel attribute can take test, classes, methods, and instances. This is something that you need to remember. The value of parallel attribute can take test, classes, methods, and instances. When you are saying that, ki baba, the test, okay, the parallel equal to test, each test tag runs separately on different threads. So each test tag is going to run on different threads. So you will notice that inside this particular test suite, I have this test tag, no? This one and this one. So if I'm saying parallel test, what is going to happen? This particular test and this particular test are going to be executed by different threads, but they will be executed parallelly. So over here, guys, the login test as well as this particular test, which is getting launched on the Firefox browser and one is getting launched on the Chrome browser. There will be two browsers which is going to get launched, and these two test classes are technically going to be executed on these two different browsers. When you are saying that it is going to be classes, parallel equal to classes, each class runs in a separate thread. So over here, I just have these two classes, na? Okay. So imagine if I was having 10 test class over here and you're also 10 class. So there will be these 10 threads, okay, or I would say 20 threads, which will be executing individual classes over there. Then you are going to have methods. Now in your test classes, you have your @test method, right? So in one test class, I can have probably 2 or 3 or even 5 test methods. So those test methods will be executed parallelly. So when you are saying that you will be having parallel methods, each test method runs on a separate thread. Generally, in the automation framework, you really want to have these test methods get executed parallelly. Then you're going to have instances. Methods of the same instances runs together. Methods of the same instances are going to run together. So observe over here, guys. So here I have this test.ng XML file, right? And inside this particular test.ng XML file, we have this entire configuration that we have set. And you will notice that parallel is set to methods. So over here in this particular framework, you will notice that I have these various test classes: add new first address, invalid credential, login test, product checkout, search product test, and all those stuff. So in these tests, you will notice that I have different test methods. So this is my first test method, this is my second, third. Because I have set parallel methods, what is going to happen? All these test methods will be executed parallelly. So this is going to be taken care by one thread. This is going to be taken care by another thread. This is going to be taken care by another thread. Okay. Now, one important thing, guys, that you need to focus over here. Remember just a moment back, I was talking about that your test needs to be clean, your test needs to be maintainable and all those stuff. Observe carefully. When you're looking at this particular test, okay, inside this particular test, you're not going to find any variable creation. The length of the code itself is one line. Yeah, that's the length of the code. So over here, most of my tests, whatever I am writing, I'm just putting them in one line. Okay, so this test is maintainable. First thing. The second thing over here is, if you're going to look at the design pattern, okay, there is a method chaining which is happening. There is a method chaining which is happening. So this is basically uses your fluent interface design pattern. Okay. So when you're talking about your framework also, most of the time people say it's going to be page object design pattern, then you're going to use singleton design pattern and all those stuff. But you can have a lot of design patterns popping up, and you should be using a hell lot of other design patterns, because when you're using design patterns, what happens? Why do we need to use design patterns? When you're using design patterns, you're actually ensuring that your object-oriented programming features, as well as you're implementing OOPS correctly in your automation framework. Okay, that's the thing. So how did you ensure that you are using object-oriented programming correctly in your framework? You would probably say that you have used design patterns over there. Now, a lot of time people ask me that, Jatin, your framework is going to be created by these AI agents and all those stuff. But if you have used ChatGPT or Claude or any of these things, right? they will not be creating the framework like this in one go. Okay. Only a person, let's say I have created this particular framework, so I know how exactly the framework needs to be created. So once I know how exactly the project or the framework needs to be set up for a particular project, what all things you need to take care of it, then I can delegate those things to these agents. Are you getting the point? But if I would have said, just go and create a framework for XYZ website and all because I want to use your Selenium WebDriver or Playwright or any of these tools, the first draft of that particular framework, whatever Claude Code and all those things will do, it's not going to be this. It's never going to be this. Trust me on that. Okay. So that's the reason, guys, you have to make sure that you build the framework first by yourself. Okay. Even now, when people are giving interviews, the major questions are still technical. Okay. So don't get into that FOMO that, Are Jatin, now to you have these AI agents and all, who's going to ask you coding questions? But the point over here is, what if they ask you coding questions? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Okay. Now you really can't have shallow knowledge. You need to make sure that you are implementing these particular project properly. Okay. This particular project, I believe, is from the SDET Foundation Masterclass. If you really want to build this, something like this, you can really check that stuff out. Now, again, if you're looking from the test methods, you will not find any conditional statement. You'll be like, everyone talks about login test only, show some other test. So you're going to go to the product checkout. Here also, you will not find any conditional statement, any loop, any try catch. I'm not using any collections or any of those stuff over here. They are used in the framework, but they are not in my test. Okay, because if you observe carefully, my test method basically just keeps on calling other methods. So there's a method chaining which happens. Again, a very interesting interview questions where you have done method chaining in your project and all, boom, in your test methods. Okay, and which design pattern is this? If you notice, this is how you write your rest assured code, right? So this is technically your fluent interface design pattern. Okay, now, so the thing is, when you are talking about parallel execution, you will have this parallel attribute and you're going to set to method, classes, instances, okay, or you can set it up to your test. The next thing that comes into picture is whenever you're going to talk about parallel execution, one more thing is used. What is that? Thread local variable. So if you observe, I have this browser utility and I'm using thread local WebDriver. Okay, so even in your automation framework, you don't directly use WebDriver or something. You're going to use it as a thread local. Okay, I think I had taken one of the lecture on thread local also. If you are watching this particular video for the very first time, you can definitely check on the series. It's going to be very helpful for you over there. So please make sure. How did you ensure for parallel execution? You have configured the parallel attribute in your TestNG XML file. Along with that, you have added thread local for WebDriver and also for WebDriver wait. Here it's not there in the code, but in reality, you will be using your thread local WebDriver wait. Is this part making sense to everyone? Perfect. So coming back to this particular document, guys, over here, you will read the last point. Use thread local WebDriver to ensure each thread has its own driver instance and to avoid any race condition. Okay. Again, as I've said, this is a very important interview question. I'm going to give it a 3-star. Please make sure that you remember this particular question. Remember how it was configured. That's it. Let's move on to the last question, which is hash map versus hash table. Okay. And the thing over here, guys, is this was, I believe, a theoretical question. Okay, so we'll just go through the entire main points. Hash map and hash table, major difference basically pops up from the thread safety part. So when you're talking about hash map is not synchronized. Okay, because it is not synchronized, it is fast. So this is not thread safe. This is not thread safe. Hash table is thread safe. It is synchronized, and because it is synchronized, it is slow. We started this particular class with some same terminologies. When you're talking about string buffer is what? What is string buffer? String buffer is synchronized. It is thread safe. You are going to use it in your multi-threaded environment and all. But string builder is not thread safe. It is not synchronized. That's the reason it is fast. Okay. Now, talking about null keys, hash map allows one null key, but hash table does not allow null key. So you're going to end up having a null pointer exception. Null values, hash map allows null values. Hash table is going to give me null pointer exception. Performance, as I've said, hash map is fast because it is not synchronized. It's not thread safe. That's the reason it is fast. And when you're talking about hash table is synchronized because it is synchronized, it is thread safe, and that's the reason it is slow. To inherits from, this is also which is very important. When we are talking about inherit from, hash map inherits from abstract map. Remember this particular name, that's important. And hash table basically comes from dictionary, which is a legacy class. Okay. Now, in your modern application, you will always prefer hash map. You don't really use hash table. But then you'll be asked in interview that, okay, what if I want to have thread safety and I want to store key value pair kind of a data, then what I'm supposed to do? That time, guys, you will be using something which is called as concurrent hash map. If you really want to have thread safety in your project and you still want to use hash map, then go for concurrent hash map because it offers thread safety. Okay. So this is all the questions that was asked for the company Capgemini. I hope you really enjoyed this particular session. Do let me know in the comment section. Now, one thing I really want to talk about is, see, I usually see people that, they're going to start watching a video, okay? But they really don't complete it off. And I'm not just talking about my video. It's this general way how people are working or processing the information around us, okay? So you might start watching a video, okay? Be it a tutorial video or an entertainment video, whatever the stuff is. And you will notice that you really don't watch the entire video. You're going to watch for like 50 minutes or like 10% or 20%, whatever. And then you move on to the next stuff. Now, there is a problem with this thing. I'll tell you what. Okay. How a brain process this thing is like, we have information, but the thing is, we have not completely processed that information. There's something which is open. So when you're going to have a lot of open tasks, okay, what happens? We start getting anxious, right? Imagine that you have this, you have a day where you have a hell lot of things to do. You're not going to enjoy that particular day. You're always going to be anxious. And today, most of the people, whoever are studying, my audience, when I'm seeing the demographic, they fall into the category of 25 to 35. So either you are married, okay, or you're about to get married. Okay, you are going to have your personal life, you're going to have your professional life, you're supposed to study, you're supposed to take care of your career, your health, your family and all. And the thing is, it's already overwhelming. Okay, we are living in a time right now where technologies are changing. The way we were working in the past, okay, it's not the same anymore. And that is also going to create anxiety. Okay, so my personal advice, what has worked for me, and I have seen it has worked for a lot of students who have studied with us, is that we stick to one plan. Okay. If you are picking up a task, no matter what task is, like whether it's your personal thing, whether it's your study thing, whatever, you're watching an entertainment video, okay, make sure you watch it till the end. Okay, first thing. And stay away from your reels, okay, your shorts and all those stuff. Because what happens is, right, in a very short period of time, you are, like consuming a lot of information. And then, like you'll start feeling that you're already tired. Okay. And when you're already tired and you start feeling tired, you're not going to put a lot of effort in studies at all. So the thing is, we used to put content on Instagram also, but then we realized ki Baba, it's not really helping because people don't really recollect what they have studied, or watched 5 or 6 reels before and all those stuff. So that's the reason we decided we're going to stick to one platform only. We're going to keep the content only on YouTube. Okay. And I want to keep it like an old school way because it's fine that, like we are studying, study is already a very slow process. But if you're able to, like convince yourself, you are able to put yourself at one place and give yourself the complete focus, I can give you in writing that in 3 to 6 months, your life is completely gonna change. So make sure that, you stay away from shorts as well as reels. That's really a bad thing for your mental sanity, I'm talking about. And if you have picked up watching, like any video, whatever you like, make sure you watch it till the end. Because in this way, you're forcing your brain that if you're going to pick up a task, you are going to complete it till the end. So it is going to reflect in all the other areas of your life. If you're going to pick up anything to study, make sure you study till the end. If you're going to do any task at your home, at your office, make sure you complete it till the end. Okay. And always have a habit, okay, of journaling. Okay. Whatever you have completed in a day, just write it down in your notebook. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it over here, that there is a white board that I have sticked over here. And I have this habit of writing whatever I have completed today and what I want to complete tomorrow. There's again a whiteboard over here also, but I keep on just scribbling my thoughts. Because if I see it, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to do that stuff. All right. So that was one of my advice that I wanted to give it to you guys, because I know that most of you guys are getting a little bit anxious about how exactly the entire job market is. I really can't change the job market, but I can just give you the tips on how you can be more productive and how you can study a little bit better. Now I'm going to see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to mark your attendance. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.